Okay, wait a minute. So this guy, this is insane. He didn't even beat the game. He played maybe 10 hours of this video game, gave up on a admittedly harder boss, and then just used everybody else's fucking, like, he used other people's gameplay for it. He didn't get past Yin Tiger. He barely got into chapter 3. He complained that chapter 2 was really long, but chapter 3 is the longest ever. And he's like sitting here. How are you going to give a commentary on a game that you didn't even play? You played like a third of it. I don't understand how your entire job is to sit down and play video games for 10 hours a day, and you can't finish the game. And then he complains that it's like not hard enough. He's like, oh, it's not really a real Souls-like. It's not hard enough. But then in the video, he also admits that he exploits when he plays Dark Souls games, and then he can't even beat the only boss he said was a Souls-like boss game fight. And he gave up after like a half an hour or so. Bro. But then he'll play the entirety of Star Wars Outlaws and beat that, a game that he hates because it's too woke. But then why aren't you beating this game, which you say is not woke? And then make up criticisms of people saying that there's not enough girls in it or something, or what? I don't understand why. It's very clear to me that Synthetic Man quite literally just pumps. He doesn't come into a video or a piece of media with an open mind. He comes into it with a perspective he already wants to have, and he goes, "Well, this game was bad," and then gives you a bunch of contradicting perspectives on the game. This guy's a fucking embarrassment. I don't understand why anybody interacts with. I think most people just think he's a joke. I think that most people think he's a joke. I mean, he has the "my mom cut my hair" haircut. But okay, man. Cool stuff. All right, guys, we're back again with some more Synthetic Man. All right, our absolute alpha male king and champion. We love him very much. I am genuinely interested in seeing his Black Myth Wukong review because last week we beat it. I think it was like a 40-hour playthrough. I beat it. I loved that game. A little just to know, I one-shot Erlang. Apparently, he's the hardest boss in the game. I didn't one-shot him. I beat him in the first attempt. People were upset with me that I called it one-shotting. I think you understood what I was saying. I liked the game a lot. It was a little difficult. People are saying it's like a little bit Souls-like, but not quite as unforgiving. But it was still a challenge. I liked it a lot. Honestly, I liked it from a gameplay perspective more than God of War. I love God of War and I love the story more, but the gameplay of Black Myth Wukong was very customizable, and it didn't give you too many resources to deal with. You know, like you had a lot of abilities, but you only got to choose like one transformation and set. There might have been like 20 or so, but you got to use one. Very simple. So it was more about getting a limited set of tools and using it correctly, rather than getting a million tools and, you know, kind of using it a little bit more willy-nilly. So, yeah, let's see what the Synthetic Man has to say about it. I'm going to assume he's upset because there's a word black in the title, and that upsets him. Because apparently in his Warhammer review, he was upset it was too woke because there was a black person in it. So, it was crazy stuff. Thank you for the 19-month small gut from Joe Mama Jutsu. Did you ever get dinner with Goop videos? I didn't. I'm sorry. Let's go.
Here we go.
Oh, and thank you for the $3 from Gravy. Pooper Trooper Gaming Streams. I don't know what that means.
Black long.
Oh, I think this is the third long that you fight. Long. It's a secret boss.
That's not much better than Black Bull.
Black Bull, I summon you.
Okay.
I wonder what's long. Am I right? Stop me if you've heard this.
Wow, that was his attempt at a joke. Is that what my jokes sound like? I feel like I'm funnier than that. Holy shit. That was terrible.
This one before. An Eastern country decides to break into the Western AAA game market, and they do so by developing a game in a widely popular genre, obviously inspired by one of the greatest games of all time, but either due to the dev studio's lack of experience, or lack of innovation, or just generally lacking in polish or focus, the game doesn't quite hit the mark. While that description might have been a bit too vague for some of you as I was playing.
I don't think that Black Myth Wukong fits that bill. I think it was a phenomenal game. I see a lot of positivity surrounding it. I think it was phenomenal.
Black Myth Wukong, I was immediately reminded of Atomic Heart, developed by a Russian studio, and you should remember Stellar Blade, released earlier this year, which was developed by a South Korean studio. And as I'm sure you already know, Black Myth Wukong was developed by a Chinese studio. And so how is
it was fantastic. I loved it a lot. It was really cool to get introduced to like a new mythology. Like, you know, I feel like Chinese mythology or I guess Western mythologies aren't really super prevalent in America. And it was cool to get like a look into it. You know, I didn't understand a lot of what was going on, but it was still pretty cool and interesting.
Is the game? Well, I'm sure I already described my basic feelings in the title. It's pretty good, but it's certainly missing something.
It's pretty good for a Chinese game, it says on here. I'm curious, what do you think it's missing?
Again, comparing this to Stellar Blade is pretty apt. It's a game that journalists hated for not being blatantly left-wing propaganda, though notably the biggest difference in controversy is Stellar Blade was hated for its sexy female characters.
Is this like a real thing, or is this like a pretend thing that he gets to say people hated it for when nobody really cared that much?
Whereas Wukong is hated for having, like, no women in it at all. And also not female characters, whereas Wukong is hated for having, like, no women in it at all.
Nobody's saying that. The only people saying that are weirdos on Twitter. There's no meaningful criticism that there aren't enough female characters in Black Myth Wukong. There are also a lot of female characters and bosses and enemies and everything in that game, actually. There's a pretty consistent amount. Who's complaining about not enough women? I don't think I've seen a single person say that. And any meaningful criticism. What the fuck is he talking about? He's like boxing ghosts already. Who was saying that? Can you guys link me like a meaningful article? Because I've been reading stuff about it and it's all positive. What are you talking about? He wants to have a problem with the game. Nobody fucking cares.
And also not having enough diversity, which I think
Nobody said that either. What are you talking about? Who said that? Wait, show me the article you're referencing, please.
y'all know by now, just transparently means there's no black people in it.
Who's complaining about this? Bro, this is what's so funny. This is a typical Synthetic Man video, is looking for a narrative in a video game. He doesn't play a game and go, you know, I noticed this thing in it. He goes, how am I going to apply my stupid fucking beliefs to this thing? Nobody was complaining that there weren't enough women. Nobody was complaining that there weren't enough black people in it. It was a good, fun game. Like, he's creating a bad guy. These things don't exist. These things don't exist, man. Nobody's complaining about any of these things.
Which is ridiculous because there's no white people in it either. All of the human characters are Chinese, as you would expect.
Yeah, no shit. Who the fuck are you talking about?
And instead, primarily being a video game first and foremost. So for some of you, that's more than enough of a reason to support this game. But at the end of the day, I am a video game critic first and foremost.
Not a very good one.
Yes, I despise left-wing ideology. You know that if you've been listening to this channel for more than a few months. But at the end of the day, I'm not...
Well, you're like obsessed with hating black people. It's very weird. It's very bizarre. That your chief complaint in Warhammer is that there's too many black people. It's weird.
Going to be impressed by a 6 or 7 out of 10 video game that doesn't have any wokeness in it.
What are you talking about? I honestly would give... I think that Wukong should win Game of the Year. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm like the greatest gamer ever. Clearly, I'm better than Synthetic Man because he had to give up on God of War on the second hardest difficulty. Whereas we're making really good progress. We stopped for a while to play Black Myth Wukong, but we're making really good progress on the most difficult difficulty. But, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why is it only 7 out of 10?
And something I do want to point out, because you're definitely going to notice it in this comments section, is that a lot of the hype around this game has been clearly astroturfed by China, despite selling over 10 million copies, which is...
The game is great. I don't know what to tell. And I'm not like a huge... Like, dude, I remember... And I hated the first 2 hours of it, and I gave it a chance, and I fell in love with that game. It's the first game I've played in a very long time where I was sad that I beat it. Because I have no real reason to play it anymore. Like, I know I could rebeat it and blah, 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 but I have no interest in doing that. And I played it for like 40 hours. Like, I played the game. The game was really good. And maybe this is just like my subjective opinion. Well, it is, but like, how does it get a 7 out of 10 or 6? What is the issue with the game?
It's definitely a success. I'm not going to deny that for a second. Approximately only 1 million of that was outside of China. The vast majority of the Steam reviews for this game are in Chinese. Barely any are in English.
Okay, so...
And when I live streamed this game for the first time...
So I'm not understanding the criticism. It can't be good because most of the people that liked it were Chinese? Like, do Chinese people not count, or what?
Over 1,500 people. There were a hell of a lot of Chinese people who just kind of stumbled in and were complaining about every minor criticism I had of the game while playing. So I'm not telling you this to say you shouldn't support it just because Chinese people like it and are trying to make it as much of a success as possible. But the hype around this game is clearly not organic, and as you'll find out in this review, it is certainly not nearly as good as some people would have you believe.
I don't think I had a single Chinese person come into my stream. that was like, hey, I'm Chinese, blah, blah, blah. The game was fun, man. What is he talking about? I gotta wait for his criticism.
It is a decent game. I'm not going to try and pretend like it's mediocre or worse than that.
You are trying to pretend it's mediocre. You said it was a 6 or a 7 out of 10. What?
Even. But I won't go into any more detail during this intro. So without further...
Just because the game resonates more with the Western market doesn't mean that it's any less good in an Eastern market. Or excuse me, I meant the reverse. You know what I meant. Just because the game resonated more with people in an Eastern market doesn't mean that it's not a good Western game. Now, the mythology isn't as interesting to people. Like God of War, Norse mythologies are more interesting to people in the Western markets because it's Western. Like, and there's a lot of people. I'm German, so it's like, oh, it's cool. Like to some degree, there's like a heritage conversation to have. Like, oh, you know what I mean? So it's cool. It's playing off of a mythology that I'm more familiar with and identify with more. So yeah, I could see why people wouldn't want to jump into Wukong because it's different. They don't have as much of an identity with it, but it's still like fantastic, and it's an interesting ride through it, knowing nothing about mythology. It was cool, especially since I was playing it and people came to the stream and were like, oh, hey, and gave me like rundowns and explanations of like what's going on, and it's like, oh, that's really cool.
Further ado, let's journey to the west in Black Myth Wukong. So, as usual, let's just dive right into the gameplay first. What type of game is Black Myth Wukong? Like I said, it's more or less a Souls-like. Now, similar to Stellar Blade, it is different enough from one that you can be forgiven for not calling it one and just saying it's kind of like hack and slash combined with minor Souls-like elements. But as the game becomes more challenging over time, you're definitely going to see the inspirations from the more recent Souls games like Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Elden Ring, of course. Now, the basic combat is something that I've heard a lot.
It's funny, I feel like the game got easier for me as I played. I was so bad at it. I posted, probably not a good idea, but I posted like a 6-hour long video of all my boss kill attempts, and I put the counter for how many times it took me to kill them, and I forget, but I had more trouble with the first boss than I did with like Erlang. And then when it came to even like the official like regular last boss, which is fighting yourself basically, I think I took 2 or 3 attempts on each phase. But I took like fucking 10 attempts to kill the first boss. So I kind of went in reverse a little bit with that.
A lot of people praise, but I'll be honest, I think the mechanics are a little on the weak side. They're way too basic. Honestly, the worst part
I mean, I think they're pretty good.
It might just be your standard light attack combo. You press square several times in a row, and your character does the same exact light combo every single time. And even...
So here's the thing. I'm just going to disagree with this fundamentally. I can appreciate a game, and I can appreciate anything that knows how to take simplicity and make it a little bit more complex. That's pretty much it. And I felt like the combat in Black Myth Wukong was simulating enough, because instead of giving you, like, I compare it to World of Warcraft. I'm playing right now. In World of Warcraft, and I'm playing modern, but still, everything is extraordinarily bloated. You have a lot of different things that you have to press, and you have a lot of different things that you have to touch, and like obviously you can be effective, and it's more difficult than the live version of the game. But sometimes it can be a little bit annoying and overwhelming, whereas I wish it was more like, let's say like Hades would be probably a better example, where you have fewer things to do, but it's more difficult. I like having a couple of tools. Give me 3 or 4 abilities, or a smaller, like, limited ability set, and then let me kind of run wild with that, rather than give me 40 different abilities and being like, okay, like, a bloated kit doesn't make it better. More isn't necessarily better. It's nice to have a limited kit. And, like, every single attack in the light attack combo chain is different. It has different, execution times, it has different effects, it has dodge times, it'll like, you can get punished for doing like the last part of the combo or a middle part of the combo. They're all a little bit different, so there's a different interaction with the world when you use something. Like, you can get punished for, I think there's like 5 attacks in the chain. So, like, you can get more punished on, like, the 3rd or 4th attack because it is a longer stretched attack than any other attack. And then it's really nice when you get, like, the dodge increase, where, like, you can dodge and it continues your attack chain. So there's, like, a lot of different ways to do it. I like that. Yes, it's the same button, but it is basically 5 different abilities and a different way to play, which you have to monitor to some degree. I think it's pretty good. And the game is hard, so it kind of makes up for it.
Your heavy attack on triangle is only used when you build up a focus point.
Yes.
You get focus energy from hitting enemies, or you can charge it up by holding triangle. The stamina management portion of this game is nearly non-existent, even though you do have a stamina bar.
It is existent. It gets easier as time goes on, which I think is this is just not true. Which is a positive thing. Your stamina, basically running, jumping, and using abilities is going to drain stamina. In the beginning of the game, it's much more difficult to monitor your stamina when you're playing, because even like everything burns, it attacks everything. So it does exist. It's not like the most overwhelming thing, but one of the things I really like about Black Myth Wukong 2 is you feel very powerful as you move on in the game. Like things feel meaningfully different. You feel meaningfully stronger. And I'll say, like, compared to God of War, when I leveled up and got new abilities, I didn't necessarily feel stronger or more capable. I just felt like I had like a little bit of a difference. But in Black Myth Wukong, you will feel stronger. It is part of the journey. Like, you feel like you are becoming more powerful. You feel like you are becoming a god, basically, which is kind of what's happening. I think the gameplay and the evolution of your character is absolutely very consistent with the feel of what they want the game to be. You become more powerful, you become more godlike, you get more tools, you get more stamina, you get more of the ability to execute yourself as time goes on, and you feel to some degree it's like it gives you a little bit a level of character immersion.
Very early on, it gets extended to such a point that you're barely ever penalized for spamming square and occasionally pressing circle to dodge. Yes, of course.
I mean, you just took a fucking chunk of damage there.
Of course, this is another game with a dodge roll with invincibility frames, and the invincibility frames are very generous. Now, something that might
they can be sometimes.
surprise some of you is that
they get more generous when you get one of the relics, if you choose that relic.
There's no dedicated block button in this game. This is definitely a roll spam game, without a doubt, even though you do gain a magic spell that allows you to parry basically any attack
you turn to a rock
by turning to
and frankly, I think that you're better off using the invisibility, because you can go invisible and you can drink a little bit before getting off an attack. I think it's better.
Stone. Even that costs mana and has a cooldown, which, to go off tangent for just a second, I do want to complain about the very poor translation of some of these menus. So this game has a generic skill tree system, which I'm not going to complain about at the moment, but it definitely felt very sloppish and probably the most like Western AAA aspect of this game. But that is,
I didn't think it was sloppy. I thought it was like is somewhat simple and it was organized. I don't understand like the hate for simplicity. I don't really understand. I feel like it's a very almost like Western concept if one things to be so like over bloated. Why? Like, who gives a shit if it's simple? As long as it's executed well, I can appreciate simplicity.
Aside, a couple of these descriptions for the ability upgrades don't really make any sense, and Resolute Counter was probably the worst one, so it's under your might stance. And
yeah, that's why you would Google it. I understand what he's talking about. He's not necessarily wrong about it. It can be a little bit bizarre. Some things aren't exactly perfectly explained.
Yes, this game has 3 different combat stances, which is why some people are comparing this to Neo.
Yeah, I just used the pillar stance one. I preferred that. I actually like that. I was watching somebody else play the game, because I like the game a lot, and I'm so surprised at the different techniques. Like, I watched a video on TikTok that was like, "Oh, here's my advice on how to beat Erlang," and he's just doing so much of a different strategy to like what I did, where I played a much more defensive and safe way, where other people would probably play a little bit maybe it's more exciting, you could even say. And I was like, that's just cool. I think it's very cool that everybody can pick a different play style. And you can enjoy yourself. I like that. Like, I got criticized for using Azure Dust the whole game, but I like that playstyle. It's slower. I can appreciate using that because, like, I get a break in the middle of the fight, which is usually pretty fast-paced. It was cool.
Personally, I liked Neo better than this game, but that's besides the point. So,
didn't you say it has a lot of boobs?
Examine this wall of text right.
Yeah, performing heavy attack during a light attack combo. So that's if you use a heavy attack as part of the combo, which is something that you could do. I never did. I didn't get anything that would use heavy attacks during the combo because I felt like they were too dangerous. So I would just use the heavy attacks independently after the combo was over. But performing a heavy attack during a light attack combo with a focus point, so you have to have a focus point. Consumed allows the destined one, which you are the destined one.
Casting.
Just shut the fuck up, dude. To execute Resolute Strike. Okay, so not too bad. If you have one focus point, okay, while you're doing a light attack combo, you can execute an ability. I don't think that's super complicated. During Resolute Strike, the destined one, which is you, can see through the incoming enemy attacks and nullify their damage. This is confusing. From what I've looked into, what this means, seeing through an attack is, I believe, when you use this ability at this in a timing that would be the same as a dodge, if that makes sense. It is difficult to understand, but basically, you can use this ability instead of dodging, and it'll perform a very similar thing. That's what it means. If you use this attack when somebody's about to hit you, you'll basically parry their attack. That is what this means. It is complicated, and it's not something that's explained in the game, which is frustrating, but you can look this up on your own, and you can find this.
right here. Now, my question is, what do you think this upgrade does? Do you think it's A, when you execute a heavy attack during a light attack combo, you enter a buffed state where you nullify enemy damage? Is it B, when you execute a heavy attack during a light attack combo with no focus point, do you enter a buff state where you nullify enemy damage? Is it C, when you execute a heavy attack during a light attack combo with a focus point, do you get an incredibly brief moment of invulnerability that is not signified on screen in any way, which if you
I think it turns you black, which maybe he's upset about.
parry the attack successfully, then you stagger the enemy with the counter? For a move that is very useful in the early game, you would think that the localization team would have made sure it was very clear what this actually does.
Sure, this is a legitimate criticism.
Because it definitely makes the game a bit easier on you if you don't have to cancel every single combo into a dodge. But whatever.
But again, you don't have to cancel combos into the dodge because you can actually get an ability pretty early on that makes it so that your dodge will still extend your combo window. So
Get back to the core gameplay mechanics again. Much like Stellar Blade, this is the type of game that is made vastly easier through the use of super moves that consume mana. These moves include immobilizing any enemy, including bosses, allowing you to get a bunch of free hits on them.
it depends on the boss. Some boss, like the Yin Tiger or whatever, you can only get off one attack. So it does depend on it. Yeah, sure. I mean, okay.
You can turn invisible with the enemy attacking where you were last seen until you strike back with a counter.
Well, it doesn't exactly do that. What it does is it creates like a another version of you that stays there and has a limited amount of health. So it doesn't necessarily attack where you last were.
Attack,
But okay.
staggering them. You can consume your might meter to transform into a mini boss that has its own completely unique moveset, animations. Sometimes they have a super ability as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't consume your health, so it's actually a pretty cool thing.
And it's a free health bar, which, as you can
This guy's name was Hitler. What the fuck?
probably guess, is easily the most broken ability out of your selection.
Okay.
And of
I don't think it's broken. I think it's just the ability.
Of course, there's other powerful abilities you get access to during your journey, like the Shadow Clones, and all of these magic spells.
Yeah, I never really used those. I didn't find them particularly fun. They would get killed so fucking easily, and I preferred to not do that. For the most part, I like to play. I just like play differently.
Feel pretty damn good to use. Not only are they really powerful, but they're just inherently satisfying. I really have nothing to complain about them. I think being able to turn into a select few mini-bosses is just a really good idea. Now, as for your other spells, they both have cooldowns and consume mana. And one of the weirder decisions of this game is that there is no mana potion. Outside of specific skill upgrades, there's no way to actually recover your mana bar except resting at a bonfire. And I think
Yeah, I think that's fine. So that's actually not 100% true. I don't know if there's any like potions that you can get for that. You can get potions for everything else. But what I did was one of the gourds that I had recovered a little bit of mana every time that I drank for my health. So like you can get the ability to recover your mana. I don't think it's an issue. I think that especially for some people, I gotta turn this fucking DBM off. It's making me want to kill myself. Sorry. I think that for some people, and this is something that I resonate with, is that there are times where there are too many systems in a game, especially in Western games. I remember playing, I forget the exact name, it was like a Diablo-ish MMO clone. The game was really fun, but there were so many fucking systems in the game. There were so many systems inside the game that it just feels like it's overwhelming and like unnecessary, and it kind of pisses you off. They decided to not do that. Adding a mana potion system is a system in the game, and so it seemed like they weren't trying to bloat the system. I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, we did just establish that it was a new company that was trying to break into a Western market, and so to some degree, it seems like they were kind of appealing to that Western market. I don't really see an issue with it, honestly. I think it's fine. I enjoyed it.
it's definitely done on purpose so that you were encouraged to save all of your magic spells for the bosses.
Yeah, well, you're complaining about mana management, so.
And as you'll find out in just a couple hours in, there's a shit ton of bosses in this game. So
Yeah, there's like 100 of them.
there's no reason to waste your spells on fodder enemies.
Well, usually you can rest before like every single boss, so.
After defeating certain enemies that have a blue aura, you also get the ability to use spirits, which are a special short transformation that you activate by pressing L2 and R2 at the same time, which is basically just,
I just used the first one that I got because it gave me passive defense on top of everything else.
just one super attack that you get. A lot of these feel completely useless, especially if they have no invincibility frame.
I don't agree. They don't have invincibility frames, and since, again, you were talking about stamina management, that would suggest that you were looking for a higher difficulty. They didn't, so you had to time them correctly. It's a skill gap. for sure. But some of them had passive abilities or passive things that would add to your character, and that's why I used the original one. It did a big chunk of damage. I liked it a lot.
Games you can actually just get knocked straight out of it immediately, and the damage usually isn't worth it either. So there's a few.
That's definitely not true. That's fucking insane that you'd even say that. I was using the guy who does like the headbutt. He does a significant amount of damage if you could time it the right way, but it's difficult. It can be difficult to time sometimes. So, I mean, like a little, you can immobilize him and then use it if you wanted to, and you can break the immobilization and do the other thing, so.
That are vastly more useful than other ones. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what the good spirits are. As you would expect, there's also usable items that can increase your elemental resistances, your defense, your attack. These definitely can make some boss fights easier. On top of all this, there's also a light RPG system where you can equip various gear that increases your defense.
Sure, and you can upgrade that gear too so that you can have a playstyle. I went with the immobilization playstyle because I just liked it a lot, so.
There's set bonuses that have special buffs if you equip multiple pieces of the same armor. There's actually different types of Estus flasks that do slightly different things, and you can
like recover mana,
equip items to modify a secondary effect of Estus as well. I actually kind of like the RPG mechanics in this game. In most Western AAA slop games, a lot of these RPG mechanics feel completely tacked on. A good example is like God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, where a lot of the buffs are like a 5% increase to damage or defense of something, which is just a fucking complete joke. Whereas in this game, a lot of these set bonuses actually...
Just to be clear, this guy couldn't beat God of War on the hardest difficulty. Okay, dude, you can't be a pro gamer, all right, bro?
Make a significant difference, and you definitely feel the defense increase.
I mean, to me, when I play God of War, I don't really see an issue with the way that they decided to do it. Again, I'm not a big fan of like super bloated mechanics, and that's a very big shift from what the game used to be anyway. So for them to have a much more basic RPG type system, I don't think is a problem, but it does have a level of an impact on your playstyle. Like the secondary effects are going to have an impact on your playstyle, and the point is, in my opinion, to be able to, for different people to have different playstyles when they play the game. I don't really necessarily see an issue with the way that God of War decided to orchestrate their RPG system. Again, basic doesn't make it bad. I don't like this concept. If something can be basic and still be really good, that's what like roguelikes are all about. Very basic gameplay that's like difficult. It's more about skill rather than having like a you know, abundance of different things.
And I know it might not sound like it, but I basically already described most of the moves you're going to be using for the entire game. This combat system is not very complex. Like I said,
it's not, but again, it's not about being complex. It's about it being something that like it's difficult, can be a little bit difficult to master it.
Instead, you're gonna be spending most combats just spamming the square button and dodging when it's time to dodge. It's not quite...
Yeah, and then timing the limited abilities you have, using them correctly so that you can like take down the enemy and like have like a smooth flow to the fight. I was never bored playing this game. There was like one or two fights that I was like, this is kind of fucking boring. It was pissing me off. But I was, for the most part, like there were very few bosses that I was bored on out of like the 100 bosses that they had. Bosses and mini bosses. And there were very few fights I felt were unfair. Because there are sometimes fights, and I felt this in God of War more, where sometimes it just felt like weird, stupid, and unfair. Just felt like it didn't feel like a challenge. It just felt like a cheap shot. I didn't really feel that in this game. You know, anytime I died, I could pretty much always attribute it to me just being not good at the game, which I like being able to do. I like it being able to be my responsibility. It feels more fair. The fucking Yin Tiger really pissed me off. But outside of that, like I think all the other bosses were fantastic.
A turbo style.
I will say that like it did feel kind of easy towards the end, so like maybe that's a criticism because it wasn't like a true Souls-like game. But then also I might have over leveled because every time I would die, I would just like re-kill a bunch of stuff and get more XP. So I don't really know. Or maybe the game just could have been a little harder. I don't know. Maybe they could have implemented a harder difficulty mode. The benefit though to having one difficulty in a video game is that you are balancing that entire game around that difficulty. And that's that can be a positive thing. Because this way you don't have to do as much testing of like, okay, we have to make sure this is fair on this, and this boss might be a little bit better or worse. We have to make it a little easier or harder based on like the difficulty because X, Y, Z. So like it helps out because it limits the amount of focus you have to get. So it's really good from a game design perspective to do that. So I can appreciate them doing that because again, this seems like they were trying to break into the market. So they were focusing on the meat and the potatoes of the game, which I think were fantastic. Right, so one difficulty makes it easier for you to manage. You don't have to, balance 4 different difficulties. I don't think that's too bad.
Hack and slash, a la, Bayonetta or God of War or Devil May Cry or even something like Kingdom Hearts. This is definitely somewhere between those games and Souls games where you can actually get locked into certain animations and not be able to immediately dodge or parry or use a spell. The animation locking can definitely get annoying because this game feels like you're supposed to be able to do basically any action at any time, but
Why does it feel like that? You're supposed to be punished for making poor choices. That's because it's a skill issue. What?
That's just not the case.
It doesn't feel like that at all. I don't understand that criticism. It feels like you should just be able to do whatever. No, it doesn't feel like that. There are certain abilities that are going to, you can get punished for using them. That's how it is in any difficult game.
And the stamina meter, even though it's pretty generous, also helps slightly restrict how free-flowing the combat should feel.
Okay, you're saying it's, first you're saying that it is no issue. Now you're just saying it's generous and it does restrict how the feel. He was complaining about stamina management. Now he's talking about how he's frustrated because he feels like he didn't have enough stamina to do whatever he wanted. These aren't consistent criticisms. You can't complain that the stamina... If you're complaining about stamina management being too easy, what you're saying is that like they give you too much stamina. But now you're saying that it feels restrictive sometimes? These criticisms quite literally cannot function together. He's just complaining for the sake of complaining at this point. Like, what are you talking about? This is so annoying that like duplicates the amount of... What the fuck is happening?
At least in my opinion. So it does feel weird when it's not your fault you get hit, because one move in your light attack combo is half a second longer than the other ones.
Dude, it's like he doesn't get what he's saying. So this criticism makes no sense either. Before he was talking about how your kit is too simple. But now because it's just one button. But now he's complaining about how there's a complexity in that one button, right? And like I was saying before, I liked it that I believe it was a 5-attack combo chain for your basic attack, but they were all a little bit different. And they all had different execution times, they had different durations, and they had different punishable modes. But now, he's saying it's too simple before, but now he's like, well, actually, it's kind of frustrating that you can't complain that you want a more difficult kit, and then complain when that kit is more difficult. It doesn't make any sense. They went with a simplicity approach, so that there weren't an abundance of different abilities, but there was still, you still had to manage in a way. There's nothing wrong with that. But like it's weird for him to these criticisms don't make any sense to me. They don't add up together. It's too simple with the light attack combo. But now now it's frustrating because every single light attack isn't the exact same, so it's kind of difficult to manage. You get to bitch about one of those things. You get to bitch about. I like the fact that it was simple, but every ability was a little different, so you had to have a different relationship with the ability and the attack.
Right? Now, this game is definitely not nearly as difficult as Elden Ring. You can actually take at least 3 hits without dying, and most of the time it's more like 4 or 5. And although you get...
I mean, you can take more than that. You have all these potions, and by the end, like, you have a lot of potions.
Fewer Estus flasks than Souls games usually give you, given you have so many...
I don't know, man. I had a gourd that had, like, 10 gulps on it. And I had a pretty significant chance to refund it, so I could go. I mean, I did every secret aspect of it, so.
Any powerful tools at your disposal, you really don't need that much healing. You just need to memorize the boss movesets.
Yeah, that's how every Souls game is too. You've seen people kill it with like level 1. Souls games are extraordinarily difficult, but if you have the skill and get the pattern down, you can kill like every boss without taking a single hit. That's how every Souls game is. Though once you get better at them, they're not hard.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the enemies. Now, it's
not as hard as a typical Souls game, but
this is where I'd say one of the bigger fuck-ups of this game is the normal enemy variety in this game is actually fucking terrible. All of these enemies feel like trash mobs.
That's not true. There are some enemies that feel a little more difficult. I wouldn't agree with that one. There are some enemies that are more difficult and frustrating to play, and then there are ones that are easier, and I think that that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. If your game doesn't have moments of glory where you can feel strong, then your game probably sucks. There should be moments where you feel powerful. And again, my understanding is that's the same thing in Elden Ring. I see people walking around fucking shit up. You know, that's what like the leveling system kind of generally does for you. Oh, but you're a really high level. You have the ability to fucking absolutely dumpster the boss now. It's okay to have easier enemies that like feel better to fight and harder enemies. And some of them are harder and a little bit more difficult and take a little bit of time to like get used to.
Very few standard enemy encounters that are actually challenging. A lot of times you'll just fight 1 or 2 dudes who can die in 1 charged heavy attack. You kill them and then you just run forward to the next enemy.
I will say one actual criticism is that there aren't a lot of groups of enemies in the game, and I think it's because the groups of enemies don't do well. It's weird to me at least to fight more than one enemy. It doesn't really feel like the game designed it around fighting more than one enemy at a time. So like they could have probably had a better system for multiple enemy fights that would feel a little bit more organic. I personally didn't care. I still thought it was good, but like that's a criticism I suppose that you could make.
Now, there's definitely some like Miyazaki-style traps where a bunch of undead will get up around you and attack you at the same time, or you'll get ambushed, or there could be a bunch of crossbow guys all shooting at you from an elevated ridge.
Yeah, that I felt was a little bit just frustrating and like pissed me off. But for me, like I'm, again, like I'm a little bit, I'm really just getting back into games, so that was frustrating. But then I realized that like you could, you just had to think a little bit better, and you had to use your abilities better. So like your invisibility ability, I know it sounds so silly, but I was like, oh, I should have just used that to bypass certain enemies. And then you kind of think outside the box. At least to me, that might just be like a me perspective. Other people might got it that much more quickly. But you you start thinking outside the box. You're like, oh, wait a minute, you can do this, you could do that. So,
but those are definitely the minority of encounters. Probably 10% of them are legitimately challenging, and the rest are just annoying padding. In fact,
I didn't find them annoying. I mean, I think that's just like fundamentally disagree. I still found them stimulating. It was nice to be able to kill things easily. It feels good to be able to kill things easily sometimes, as long as you're like, it's not a bad thing to have periods of like highs and lows in games, but okay.
This game feels like padding because there's so little exploration. It's basically just a series of...
I'll tell you, in fucking chapter, what is it, 4 or 3? There's plenty of there's plenty of exploration in that game. There's a lot of secrets in the game. I think there's a decent amount. I also like more linear video games. So like I probably can't tell you like it had more than enough exploration for me. I don't feel the need to have a lot of different exploration in games. I kind of like more linear style stuff. So sometimes it can get overwhelming and almost stress me out because I feel like, oh, if I go this way, I'm gonna miss something. So I didn't really find it to be lacking in that. I think that's just like a gameplay choice for me, though.
Linear hallways with copious amounts of invisible walls everywhere, which is really immersion breaking. The environments, although very detailed, feel pretty lifeless, and you definitely...
I very much disagree with feel lifeless. I don't think I could ever say feel lifeless. You could say that they feel limited, and that's fine, but lifeless? That game feels full of life. What are you talking about? Is he just going to show the sand areas? I think that the point of some of these is to create the atmosphere where things feel like, I don't want to say the word lifeless. They feel a little barren or empty, but that's intentional. It's a stylistic choice that's supposed to make you look around and appreciate the atmosphere, but also realize that you're in kind of like a desolate fucking area. But lifeless? I mean, it depends on what you think. I think when he means lifeless, he means boring. I don't think that they were boring. I think that they were still interesting and stimulating. I think that they were incredibly detailed.
You get sick of the biomes by the end of the levels.
I never had that problem. I don't know. Is that like a typical problem? Did I just love the game that much? I don't think that that's true.
Especially the desert level is so long for such a boring looking area.
It's like the least long area. It's like the second least long. What the fuck is he talking about?
Now, all of that complaining out of the way, I do legitimately have to praise something about this game. It's one of the few things that really makes it stand out, and that is the copious amount of bosses. There's a crazy amount of bosses in this game. This almost feels like a boss rush. Maybe it should have been, honestly.
It kind of was, yeah.
This has some of the most boss fights I've ever seen in any action game. It's legitimately impressive.
Well, yeah, I think that's why the regular fights were supposed to be easier, because like you're kind of getting to a boss and you're having a low period. You need to make sure that you mix your highs and lows. It can be sometimes like frustrating for a player if every single thing that you do is like difficult. Like you need to have periods where you're feeling good. You don't want to overstimulate your player to the point where they burn out after playing it for 2 hours. So, yeah.
I'm not going to downplay it on any level. Now, are all the bosses unique? No, but honestly, they don't really have to be. The mini-bosses are
There's only so many things you could do.
Short enough and just varied enough that I pretty much enjoyed all of them. I do have some problems with the main boss fights, mainly that they have way too much health. There's quite a few bosses in this game where I was just mashing the square button for like 4 or 5 straight minutes.
There are some bosses that have a lot of health. The one he's showing on the screen is an example of that. I don't think I had that problem with most bosses, though.
One of the worst offenders for this being a blatant, plagiarized, giant version of the crystal golems from Dark Souls 1. I mean, please tell me this is not just the same fucking model that they just stole from Dark Souls. That's what it feels like.
I mean, it does look very similar, I suppose.
Really, I'll show you them side by side. And of course, just a few hours of gameplay after this, I encountered a much, much worse boss.
Yeah, that boss had a lot. I don't think that this is a general criticism at all. There are moments where this happens, but it's not like a general problem with the game. I don't know why you're conflating it. There are a couple of bosses with a lot of high health pool. I think that was supposed to be the point. And they are typically large, hulking monsters where they have a lot of health. That's kind of the whole point of it. It's a rock. You'd imagine a rock would have a lot of health. kind of like aesthetically makes sense.
At the end of the Pagoda realm, which is essentially a prison, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this video because
that's definitely not the end of the... Oh, I guess the Pagoda realm inside the chapter, yeah, sure.
Is easily one of the worst parts of the game.
That part is true. That part fucking enraged me. Like nothing else. It really pissed me off, I'm not gonna lie.
You fight a boss, which is like some four-legged animal creature with a giant golden orb as its head. And I have to say, with no exaggeration, this is one of the worst bosses I have ever fought in any action game. The gimmick of the boss is simple. You hit his foot to knock him over so you can hit his real weak spot, which is his head. Well,
yeah, you beat on him until I think you break his stamina bar, I guess you could call it, and then he falls over, and then you get a lot of damage on his head. Yeah.
Damage done to his foot is severely reduced. The only way to get full damage is by hitting the orb on his head. Okay, sounds simple enough, right? Well, you have to hit him a lot to stagger him, and his window of vulnerability is really not that long, and there's no reliable way to extend it either. You can use your immobilize spell. He just breaks out of it after a few hits, and then he's back on his feet. At bare minimum...
Hold on a second.
Your immobilize spell, he just breaks out of it after a few hits, and then he's back.
So this is an ability that he was complaining doesn't do a lot of damage before. This is like the and it did this from here to here on a high health boss. This is a significant amount of damage. I just wanted to show you that he was just saying things that aren't true. But okay.
On his feet. At bare minimum, you're going to have to stagger him 3 times over the course of the fight. This would be
it was a tough fight. I actually beat that boss before they patched him and made him easier. So
bad enough. But on top of that,
it was a fucking pain in the ass fight. That thing was pissing me the fuck off, man.
This, at least twice, he's going to enter an attack animation where he's completely invincible, where he shoots lasers all across the room, which essentially paints lines on the floor, and you have to stand in between them to
that shit was enraging.
Not get hit with the super...
But it wasn't as bad as a fucking Yin Tiger.
Super strong attack. But at the same time, you also have to dodge lightning bolts that are striking on top of your position. So even if you're standing in the right spot, you're still going to probably get hit by lightning. But really, the worst part is it just stalls the fight at least 30 seconds every time he does it. And the cherry on top of this horrible design is he has one of the worst hitboxes I have ever seen for...
I don't think the design was horrible. It was just tough, and it was like overtuned at first.
His grab. His grab honestly doesn't even fucking look like a grab. He basically just jumps in the air, and when he comes down on top of you, it knocks you in midair, and you're locked in the animation.
Oh yeah, some bosses would do that. They would have something where if they hit you with their particular ability, they would fuck you in your anus. It would do like a timed attack like that.
It takes out like 80% of your health, and
it doesn't take out that much of your health, but it is annoying. But again, it's just part of that's like this is like a typical Souls game complaint. Hey, the boss has a really overpowered ability that you have to get used to, and then once you do, it's not a problem anymore.
Matters even worse, this boss has a special mechanic where if he gets off this sort of roar, wind chime, whatever, he goes into a special mode.
Yeah, I think he reduces he reduces your health. I think it increases your damage, though. I don't know if I'm right about that.
That you've been suffering from throughout exploring the prison, where it will cut your maximum health in half and add this annoying blur effect to the corners of your screen. And it also prevents you from using might to use one of your powerful transformations for a free health bar. Or if you're already transformed, it immediately knocks you out of it. The only way to prevent this is by staggering the boss before he gets it off, which is easier said than done. So if your maximum health has been cut in half and he hits you with the grab, that is a kill from full health to 0.
Hey, don't get hit, buddy.
With, again, a janky as fuck hitbox that can still grab you even if you're way behind him. No, what?
Well, it looked like he jumped in the air and turned around. Okay, so just to be clear, the complaint here is like, oh, he can get you even if you're behind him. Not every ability in every game you can just cheese by standing behind the person. So on this boss will do a jump in the air and he will spin grab you. That is a design, intentional design, to make him more difficult so that you can't just stand behind it instead of actually read it correctly. It's not that big of a deal.
How did that hit me? Dude, the hitboxes are so fucked in this game.
It's not a hitbox problem. It's like an intentional design flaw. That was a hard fight, but like, what are you talking about? It's not a hitbox issue. They made it so you can't just stand behind the boss for the grab. You would actually fucking play the game like an adult.
When I finally beat him, it ended up taking nearly 10 straight minutes of wailing on him. It's not even like it's the hardest
it takes a while.
Boss in the world, but expecting a player to consistently dodge attacks for that long is absolutely ridiculous for a game in this genre.
It's a little tough. It's an endurance fight. I wonder how long it actually took me to play it. Let me see if I can find it, because I don't know if it took 10 minutes, but it might have. Let me see. Let's see, guys. Let's go look at the Papa Gut Wiener Pooper channel. Let's go here, and let's go into this fucking terribly performing video, because, you know, I'm not a gaming channel. I could do some commentary, but I... And then let's go to this big stupid fuck I think he was, this is chapter 3. Yao Guai King, Captain Wise Voice. Right here, Captain Wise Voice, attempt number 9. Okay. It was a 6-minute fight. What are you talking about? I'm looking right here. So it took me from 1 hour and 25 minutes to 1:31. So it's actually a 6-minute fight. 6 minutes, and it took me about 6 minutes and 20 seconds. That's a little longer, but it's definitely not a 10-minute fight. A lot of these other bosses are less intense than that, but they're definitely longer fights. I mean, that's not like the average boss fight, like successful boss kill. It seems like was like 3 minutes for me. Where the fuck am I?
And to complement another element of this game, there are a few bosses that have a unique gimmick that is actually pretty interesting. There are these dragons that are behind waterfalls, and the first one that you fight has these electric maces that he smacks and shoots waves all across the arena. And after losing about a third of his health, he enters a rage state where, in a rhythmic pattern, he slams the maces over and over again, shooting out a wave every time. And at first I thought, oh, you're supposed to jump over these. Well, he varies up the timing, so you'll eventually get caught and killed. Then I tried to dodge through them. That didn't really work out either. Then I tried the stance that allowed you to stand on top of your pole to dodge them. Well, I ran out of stamina, then got stun locked. And so after being utterly stumped, it turns out the solution was as simple as stand on top of the rocks in the arena.
Or you can dodge them. I dodged them all. You just dodge them at the right time. You can do that, and you will be successful. That's how I did it. If you need better timing on your dodge, you can do a thing called dodging backwards. Right? So if it's emanating from one spot, and you're standing here, and you dodge backwards, even if the other one comes faster, you have more time to react to it because you are now further away. So, dodge backwards, guys. You can dodge backwards. Just let you know.
To avoid the attack. Now, the catch being that the boss can actually destroy these rocks if you allow him to, right? So the challenge is to make sure that you corral him away from 1 or 2 rocks so that you always have a way to...
I mean, it's cool that he did it in a way that I didn't do it. I think it's cool that there are different strategies for things, but you don't have to do that. You can dodge it. You can successfully dodge that. And you won't have an issue with your mana. Especially if you perfect dodge, you will get mana back. Or, excuse me, stamina.
Reliably avoid this attack. And hey, that's a pretty interesting gimmick. On top of the fact that, of course, he has a lightning-related debuff that can stun you, it actually...
And reduces your damage because it's made of lightning.
It felt like a pretty unique fight. And this is something you can notice in some of the other major bosses.
It's interesting because, like, I wonder if he even used potions, because the game gave you the ability to use potions that will increase your damage or reduce damage taken. I never really did. And so if you wanted to be like, oh, I didn't feel the need to use potions, the system seemed like it was kind of... not necessarily necessary. Maybe they should have made the fights a little harder and like encourage you to use potions. That could have been a fine criticism. I would I guess disagree because I don't really like using the potions. But that's like a legitimate criticism that you could use.
Fights as well. Like the Tiger is where you get the stone.
I think I did use one on that Pagoda boss actually because I was getting frustrated. I forget if it might have been a damage reduction potion. I don't really remember.
Parry ability from, so he can do that during the fight to throw you off guard. The Rat Sage can summon a giant sandstorm, including basically sand shadow clones that can attack you. And near the end of the fight, he summons...
That boss was a little bit difficult. He was fun, though.
The tornado that slowly chases you as the boss continues to attack you. And of course, I need to mention the Yin Tiger, a zodiac deity.
That fucking pissed me the fuck off. It took me 31 attempts, I think. I might have miscounted. It might have taken me a little more than that. That shit was fucking brutal, man.
Who's an optional boss in like a Painted World Pocket Dimension. Without a doubt inspired by Guts of Berserk fame, this tiger has a giant fucking sword. And this boss almost felt like a hybrid of a lot of the more challenging Elden Ring bosses with a lot of delay to his attacks and
Dude, that shit was always... I could not get the timing down on his delays, man. It was making me so fucking angry.
Super long combos, combined with the old style of Souls boss that I much prefer, where each boss in the game had a specific gimmick, with this one being the tiger vanishing into the wind, right? But the trade-off being he really doesn't have that much health, especially compared to any of the main bosses, but he gave you so few windows of opportunity to attack him, including breaking out of your immobilize spell in just one hit. And so this...
Yeah, so that's why you would probably immobilize and then use like the headbutt ability or something, or use like your... you know, whatever your fucking, not your transformation, but your, whatever soul ability you call it.
Boss fight almost felt like a puzzle of how you could output enough DPS with your mana bar to effectively beat him, since you're absolutely not going to win unless you're just a god at this game by doing light combos. He's just not going to give you a chance. So I ended up figuring out that if I combined 2 Shadow Clone spells along with my transformation into a 2-headed rat man that I had at that point, that I could output just enough DPS before I ran out of potions. But even so, man, this dude is so so fucking aggressive. Again, it almost felt...
Yeah, I hated that boss. I felt like he was annoying and unfair. That might have just been me personally, but I fucking hated that piece of shit.
like the developers took heavy inspiration from the more challenging Elden Ring boss fights.
The only thing is that you get like a pretty significant reward from killing him. I think that's specifically you can get him as a transformation, which I didn't particularly care for. I don't know if it was strong or good. But then you also get another, was it called a curio? So another like little fucking equipment slot, you know, item, which was pretty nice.
It's like Melania, but actually gave it a unique twist to keep it interesting. And the tiger's health is just low enough that you're gonna be willing to just beat your head against the wall until you finally get it right. I may have been infuriated at the time when I played this on stream. What? I hit circle, you fucking bitch-ass laggy piece of shit.
Okay, wait. He makes a lot of weird excuses when he dies a lot.
Whoa, what? He
The hitboxes are bad in this game. It's really laggy. What?
just super armored right through that. He's super armored through the explode. All right, yeah. I love how, you know what, timeout. Everyone is suggesting me to fight this boss right now. Whoa, what? A new move. Never seen that move. Just fucking cheated and pulled a new move out his ass. Yeah, I forgot. This guy is... What the? This Mary Sue piece of shit. I swear to fucking God, I'm losing it. But I have to admit, this is actually one of the better designed bosses in this game. With, of course, a great reward.
I thought it was like the fucking one of the worst design bosses, me personally, man. But that's, I guess, just a personal opinion. I just didn't like it. Maybe that was what it is. I just personally did not like. Oh fuck, I need this. Oh, dude, this is so fucking annoying.
Or giving you the ability to turn into the tiger and play as him. So again, there's just enough variety in these boss fights that I can't say it ever got tiresome. The biggest problem with these levels is everything in between the bosses feels so half-assed, or just
That I just disagree with. I didn't feel like it was half-assed at all.
straight up padding to make the game length longer. It's obvious that a shit ton of the budget and time was put into these boss fights, when maybe they should have cut a few
I don't feel like it was made to take longer. I don't think that's true at all.
of the less interesting
I think it was just made to be atmospheric. I think that they had a lot of, must have had a lot of lore to recall onto, and I don't think it was, what?
ones and developed a few more enemy types and maybe crafted more unique enemy encounters. So in summary, I'd say the combat is simple, but it's smooth and fast-paced. It's somewhat refreshing next to something like Elden Ring, where you're constantly on the defensive, unless you're exploiting magical perfume that allows you to kill every boss in 2 or 3 hits, which of course they nerfed just days after my review released. Gee, I wonder why.
I doubt that they were watching you, buddy. Although maybe it was like DSP who complains about video games all the time, and so then people, they adjust around the bad players. I don't know.
But ultimately, the problems with this combat system are fairly obvious. Really, the biggest one being that you're going to be mashing square so much of this game, even though...
You don't have to mash the button. You can just press it. I don't think it's a mashing. Again, I can appreciate the simplicity that they engaged in, where when you used your light combo, every single part of it was different. So it was still unique. It was basically set 5 abilities with 1 button. I like that. I like that aspect of it. He was complaining about how there's different timings on it. I don't understand how he talks about how it's too simple, but then also complains that there's a complexity in it. So it's like kind of some of his criticisms are just weird.
No, there's 3 different combat
Thank you for the $2 from Switty Weber Manjensen. He really is DSP's son, right?
You're most likely going to be using the might stance for a significant amount of your playthrough, so you're going to...
No, I used pillar stance the whole time. I liked it better. It's nice that you got to use whatever stance that you wanted to use.
See that same exact square over and over and over again. And like I mentioned before, it is infuriating when you get trapped in a slightly longer animation and can't cancel into a dodge or cancel into your Resolute strike either, which kind of defeats...
He's sitting here and he's complaining about the game being hard. He's complaining it's too easy because you only have 1 light attack button. And then he's complaining that it's too hard because every one of the light attacks is different and requires a different way to interact with it. It's like these 2 criticisms don't exist well together.
It's the whole point of having a brief invulnerability period if you can't trigger it at any time. And the other huge
skill issue, bud.
problem being that the boss fights are the only fun encounters, really. Even
I don't think that that's true.
the more
They are more fun than the regular things, I'll tell you that. I don't think that they're the only fun though.
challenging standard enemy fights, whether it just be a couple really strong guys or a whole gang squad, don't actually feel all that fun because you're not really equipped with tools to deal with them without wasting your mana bar. And as I've explained already, you don't want to waste your mana bar on anything that's not a boss. So
that's not true. You're wrong. And I don't know why you're so wrong about that. I don't even know how you have that perspective. Every single boss allows you to rest and recover all your shit before it. I don't know how you have this idea that you need to remain or retain your fucking mana bar. It's just not true. Every single boss, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single boss where you were not able to fully recover before fighting it. I don't understand where this criticism comes from. Like, how do you not know this?
So these fights feel like they're trying to emulate Dark Souls' design without understanding that Dark Souls' mechanics were perfectly equipped for those types of encounters. This is the type
You can use as much mana as you want, buddy.
of game where your attacks basically glue onto whoever you're locked onto.
Yeah, so you don't have to lock on, but yes.
Despite the fact you wield a bow staff, it generally only hits the thing directly in front of you, unless you use certain attacks in the second stance that you unlock. But I basically never use that stance ever, and it's not like the normal enemy encounters are that challenging in the first place, which is part of the problem. Regardless, I just think in general, this
Again, I don't think it's a problem that not every boss or not everything is difficult. There are even some bosses that were easier. Again, it's okay to have periods of high and low, even in a hard video game.
combat just feels a little unpolished and far too repetitive.
I just disagree with that 100%, but okay.
The only reason that it stays compelling is because of the boss fights. The player controls are just way too simplistic and repetitive. You can say that Souls...
I mean, it's so hard for you to complain about being too simplistic when you complain about how it's too complicated. Like, one of his complaints will be like, oh, it's too simplistic because you only get one button. And then he complains that it's too complicated because every single light attack is different. It's like, you can't complain about that.
games' movesets are more simple, which they are, but they also have like over 20 different weapon types that have unique moves. In this, you have the same bow staff and just 3 variations of the light attack combo with a slightly different strong attack and some slightly different properties. But even then, you have to invest skill points into these things, and while you can respec those skill points at any time, the point still stands that this ends up feeling incredibly repetitive and overly reliant on overpowered abilities to make the combat feel good. But the boss fight...
I just disagree, I guess. I mean, I appreciated the simplicity of it because it was still hard. So, thank you for the $2 from Little Amnesty. Shout out Elden Ring perfume build. I made that. You made it? What do you mean?
Fights are an absolute win. I really have no real complaints except for a couple specific fights I thought were bad. But for the most part, I think the boss variety is a really great thing going for this game. Now, believe it or not, for the rest of the aspects of this game, I don't have a whole lot to say. I basically already covered my thoughts on the level design in that I think it's fucking terrible. There's way too many invisible walls everywhere. Everything is a fucking linear path with a couple other branching linear paths. There's no real, like, verticality.
Everything's a linear path with other branching linear paths. What does that mean? Okay.
Or climbing. There aren't interesting traps, at least outside of ambush encounters. Like, there's no Sen's Fortress, no platforming sections, not really anything to break up the basic gameplay, and like I said, most normal enemy encounters are easy as shit anyway, so yeah, the level design's not...
Well, there's like 100 bosses, so that doesn't matter, does it?
Great. I don't think I need to go into it in detail. The only thing I really liked were the secret areas that you had to unlock. That's always good, but the rest was pretty mediocre to bad across the board. As for the visuals, I think the game looks great, but some of the aesthetic choices are kind of bland. Like, the desert level just kind of looks pretty boring. I also think
it's a desert. Deserts are... I don't think it looks boring. It looks on theme. But okay.
I think the prison level looks pretty boring, and the gimmick there is horrific. It reminded me a little bit of Tower of Latria from Demon Souls, which is actually one of the best areas in any Souls game, at least in my opinion. Unfortunately, Black Myth Wukong's version is way worse, because instead of having like pseudo-stealth mechanics with the Lovecraftian tentacle guards who could paralyze you with a spell and then grab and pierce you through your skull, sort of encouraging a different type of gameplay style. Plus, the atmosphere is fucking top-notch. Everyone loves Tower of Latria. It's awesome. Instead, how it works in the Pagoda realm is every something like 5 minutes, you'll hear this mysterious chime which spawns these...
Yes, this part is very infuriating. That's absolutely true.
Giant lantern-headed dudes. It cuts your maximum health in half, and all of the enemies become...
So this area is like infuriating, it's frustrating, and it's like anxiety-driven. The cool part about it is once you beat that big boss that does the mechanic that cuts your health in half, that goes away, so you can go re-explore that area, and it's less frustrating to deal with. I think that the general recommendation is just to go invisible and run through as much of it as possible, like checkpoint to checkpoint, so...
Become super aggressive, having red eyes. My issue with this mechanic...
And I think you get a damage increase, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
...is that it just happens. There is no player interaction with it whatsoever.
This part, these are cheap here. These feel like cheap. When you're walking around here, sometimes they'll like fucking come out of nowhere and shoot you, and you just like fall off. It's so fucking annoying.
...for taking your time with the game. And it's a heavy punishment at that. It doesn't feel like a unique challenge. If anything, it makes you just want to run through the area to get to the next bonfire, right?
That's
It was an
true.
incredibly annoying zone. I find it ironic that the one point of the game where the level design actually mattered was also probably the worst area in the game. But yeah, getting back
and I agree with that, sure.
to the visual aesthetic, I think the Chinese design of the Yao Guai are fairly cool, though there's an overabundance of these ugly furry characters. Now, obviously...
What? I think that those are just mythological demons and part of their thing. So
They're not sexualized, which is definitely a good thing. But them being just these hideously ugly anthropomorphic.
But they're not sexualized, which is a good thing. Weren't you just complaining that people were complaining that there was too much boobies in another game? I don't think that you actually mean that. You don't think that. What is he talking about?
And fairly cool, though there's an overabundance of these ugly furry characters.
Doesn't this guy have a meltdown when people complain that there's boobs in video games? Why would it being not sexualized matter to you at all? I don't understand that.
Now, obviously, they're not sexualized, which is definitely a good thing. But them being just these hideously ugly anthropomorphic animals, I don't know, I'm just not a fan of the design. I don't have any artistic critique of it. But a lot of the more demonic
it was fun.
Creatures do look cool. As for the story, there really isn't much story to speak of. Not a whole lot of what I would call lore either. Like
there is a lot of story. They don't necessarily push it in your face as much. It's something I kind of like about the game. If you're somebody who knows the mythology, you're probably going to have a better relationship with the story. It can be a little jarring because I don't really know what was going on a lot of the time. Story-wise, I did find things cool and interesting. You know, but what I will say is I did appreciate that it wasn't as intrusive. The story wasn't as intrusive, which I liked about that. Because, like, you know, God of War, the first one, 2018 is great, story-wise, line-wise. But it gets super fucking annoying when you have to play as Atreus. It just gets fucking annoying. Some of the story can be a little bit aggressive and, like, in your face. It's still great, but
like other Souls-likes, there's basically nothing to this. It almost feels like an old arcade game where your grand task is to find these 6 relics so you can revive Sun Wukong, who is turned to stone or he's trapped inside it or something.
He was okay. So just to be clear, he's dead. So the story is, my understanding is that Sun Wukong had he basically had something on him that forced the gods to have control over him, and he was tired of effectively being oppressed in some capacity. So him and his friend Erlang came up with a strategy for Erlang to kill him. And then after he would kill him, he would no longer have this crown that was like stapled to his head in some capacity. And so throughout the entire game, that's why they're almost like letting you regain your power, because they think they're going to get you back in their service. But you're really doing it to break that service, right? But you never really return to the person that you were. So it's a very interesting storyline when you look into it. That's not explicitly said in the game, which is like a bit of a criticism. Again, I think that if you are somebody who grew up in like with this mythology, you probably going to resonate with you a little bit more. You'll have a better understanding of it. But I thought it was very interesting.
As you see in the intro of the game. And that's pretty much it. From what I understand, a lot of the stuff that happens in this game are direct references to Journey to the West, which I know is a very famous story, but
yeah, apparently it's a story that like inspired like a lot of anime. Like what is it called? Dragon Ball? I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before.
Haven't read it, and this game really doesn't try to explain on any level what's happening, why I should care about all these side characters who just come and go. I mean, can you imagine if a Lord of the Rings game came out today and you were expected to have read the books or seen the movies to even understand the slightest bit of what's going on? I don't care.
Well, I think that probably is something that happens, no?
If every Chinese person has read Journey to the West, which I find unlikely anyway, this is just not a smart way to tell a story. And in between the chapters, they tell these little mini stories that are animated, right?
Those are fun. I like those a lot. Those are great.
In the second...
My favorite one was about the fox.
Story that was told about some fox that a guy rescues and takes back to his home is some of the most alien shit I have ever seen in my life. I know there's culture shock, like not all cultures are the same, especially Eastern ones often have very different types of stories than Western ones. But let me just give you a summary of the story and tell me if this makes sense to you.
Yeah, so the story is that he meets a fox that turns into a girl. She's some kind of demon or something. And then he marries the fox girl. And then they love each other, and then one day she goes fucking crazy and like kills him and like his family, or her family too, I guess. And so he wakes up, it turns out it was just a dream, and so he wakes up and he kills the fox and he wears it as a pelt. And then it's actually a side quest in the game where you go and you help her by like killing that guy. So interesting stuff.
So a man finds an injured fox, he takes it back to his home and bandages up its leg. He then goes to sleep and wakes up and sees the fox has turned to a beautiful woman. And long story short, she becomes his wife, he starts a family with her, and then one day tragedy strikes as I guess one of their daughters is like some kind of demonic fox-human hybrid.
Oh, is it the daughter? I thought it was his wife that turns into it, but maybe I was wrong about that one.
and kills his family.
I could have swore that it was her, that she goes crazy and does it, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Of course, this is all a dream. He wakes up, he looks at the fox, and then there's a hard cut, almost as if this is a setup for a joke, and he skinned the
Well, no.
fucking fox.
I think they just didn't want us to watch him skin the fox.
Oh. What the fuck? Alright, never mind. Never mind. Okay. I'm like, wow, what a relatable human experience. No, he has a dream about the fox being a woman, having a family.
Yeah, and then he harbors a lot of guilt over killing the fox. I would have killed the fox too, man. So, fuck. There's a world with demons in it, and I would be like, fuck that. I ain't gonna die over this motherfucker, you know?
And then she kills everyone, and he's like, okay, I gotta skin this animal now. You guys wonder why I only
I think the idea was that he was gonna kill the animal, or he did. The skinning was just how he did it.
trust the white man. Now, what's even stranger about this story is it's actually incorporated into the game. As you make
and then you get to run around as that thing too, which is kind of cool.
your way through Chapter 3, you'll eventually find the spirit of the fox, and you actually get a chance to avenge her and set her spirit to rest. I don't really think this redeems the story because it still doesn't really make sense.
It's probably a mythological story. There's stories in the Bible about fucking talking to burning bushes. I think that this one is okay too. It's a mythological story. I think the point of the story, and the way that it's expressed, it really is about like not succumbing to your your fears and your dreams. That's usually what weird stories are about. So I think that's what it was about.
But at the very least, you get some closure. Okay, let's just get to the conclusion. Should you buy Black Myth Wukong?
Yeah, 100%. You get a lot out of it if you get into it. It's a fantastic game.
I would say
I'm surprised. I am genuinely surprised that he did not. I don't think he beat the game. I almost guarantee that he didn't beat the game because he didn't reference anything after Chapter 3. I don't think that he beat the game. I have to actually look into that. I don't think he beat it. Did he use any clip from anything past Chapter 3? Did he use any spider boss clips? Chapter 4, the lava was Chapter 5, Chapter 6 was the end. Because he didn't put a single flying bit in there. Am I wrong? Like maybe I'm not paying attention enough to the video, but he didn't reference like any of these bosses. I don't thought he... he didn't beat the game. I'm pretty sure he did not beat the game. Oh, I fucked that up a little bit. Oop, that was dumb. What the fuck? I'm assuming... How are you gonna do like a review without finishing it? Was it too hard for him? Wait, how can he give a review of the game that he didn't beat? I'm so confused. What the fuck? This dude's so weird. Wait, your whole thing is playing video games. That's like your whole channel. Like, wouldn't you want to finish the video game? That's your whole channel to do? I don't understand that. That makes no fucking sense to me. I'm like, is there a way for me to confirm he did not beat the game?
say wait for a sale. It's certainly a pretty good game.
I would buy it fucking now, man. I think the game is fantastic. I mean, if you want to wait for a sale, be my guess, but...
But ultimately, its problems are that it's not quite polished enough in a lot of the important
It's definitely not true.
ways that matter, aka the core combat mechanics and the lack of interesting normal enemy encounters. Also, the level design is incredibly amateurish. Not the aesthetics, I think the game looks great, but the actual level design, you exploring a bunch of fucking linear hallways, yeah, that's not compelling on any level, especially if you compare it to something like...
There's nothing wrong. Like, it's fine to say, like, yeah, I don't really like linear game. The game isn't really explicitly linear. But you saying, like, yeah, I wasn't a big fan of it. It's a little too linear. That's fine. But, like, it's not poorly designed. It's just not for you. Like, I don't understand why there isn't more like, yeah, you know, this didn't resonate with me. I like more this type of design. It's like, oh, this game was an amateur-style game that I didn't finish, even though I'm a video game content creator. I still reviewed it because it was a little too linear for my taste. Not everybody likes linear game, or excuse me, well, they don't, but not everybody likes like non-linear game. I don't really like non-linear games as much. But when I look at like a non-linear game, I don't go, this game really sucked because it wasn't linear. I go like, oh, this is really just like not for me. And so maybe I'm reading too much into it, but this just kind of communicates the typical fucking, you know, complex that he has where like if he doesn't like it, it's bad. He can't just be like, yeah, you know, this really wasn't for me. You know, it didn't resonate with me and the way I like to play or consume games. It's bad because it's not linear. or because it's too linear. It's very synthetic, man. It's very synthetic, man, criticisms.
Like Dark Souls 1, where a massive part of that game's appeal was the exploration. That said,
well, I mean, this game still has exploration. It's like a 40-hour beat on it, so just to be clear.
As I covered with many examples in this review, I think the boss fights are actually...
And my understanding is things like Bloodborne are like just as linear as this, so am I wrong about that?
Quite good. You can tell a lot of the budget, a lot of the time was put into making each boss feel at least slightly unique. And while there are a couple stinkers in there, I'd say overall they are good to great. And there's so many.
I'm pretty sure he only beat Chapter 3.
Of them. Truly, that is what this game can claim as its own, is having more boss fights than I've probably seen in any action game.
I have
like
to say,
Black Myth Wukong...
This guy definitely didn't beat the game. He played maybe half of the game. And I don't think he did any of the extras or bonuses. What a weirdo. Okay, incredible stuff. I think it's very difficult to judge Black Myth Wukong without finishing the game. Only because, again, one of the things that I thought was fantastic about the game was that you power spiked so hard as time went on. And it was so great because your character is supposed to be the destined one. You're supposed to be Wukong. You're supposed to be a god. And you're just not quite there yet. But every single chapter, you get more and more powerful. And it's just so interesting. It's like a lot of fun to engage with because you just get more and more powerful. Your kit gets better and better. It feels really cool and it feels really fun. And I like it a lot. And I feel like without referencing that, I feel like that's a big part of the game, no? Like, yeah, you know, you gain so much power. Like, that's a really big, awesome part of the game. I feel like without referencing that, you just come off as so bland and shallow and like unable to really give meaningful criticism or commentary on things. Like, all he really said was like, yeah, he made up a lie about them people complaining that it wasn't enough diversity. Nobody ever said that. And then he complained about things, and then he would basically inconsistent. Oh, the controls are too simple, but it's really annoying that my light attack changes in the way that it does damage and the way that like it has punishable frames and mobility frames, and it's just a fucking mess. It's just, I didn't really want to like it because I'm a video game contrarian. I don't really do reviews. I'm just a contrarian.
It reminds me a lot of Atomic Heart and Stellar Blade. I can respect a lot of these other countries.
Did you finish those games either? Or
he's trying to break into the AAA space because, as you already know if you watch this channel, AAA games are in a worse place than they've ever been. So it isn't.
That's probably not true, truthfully speaking. Like, I think that we like to pretend that games used to be great. Games, like we have an entire industry that is designed around games that were not finished correctly, and it's called speedrunning, where people exploit games constantly. If you guys ever grew up back in the day, games used to suck fucking balls. We have a level of nostalgia associated with it, but games now are probably better than games have ever been. There's just so many games that are so available to everybody, and everybody has a disposable income for it. And there's so many different types of people playing games, and not every game that's created is created for you. I'm not saying there aren't shitters. I'm just saying, like, do you really think when you have a world where like fucking E.T. was created? Like, you know what I mean? Like, games have never been always like a hit. You know, we find games that we resonate with and then we'll play them a lot. Oh, this is like fucking really stupid. What am I doing? There's games that like you'll play and they resonate with you a lot, but like they're not necessarily like, games have always kind of, you know, had their shitters, man. It's not really, I don't know, man.
Incredibly refreshing to play some games that have no political propaganda in them. But yes,
yeah, because black people are political propaganda to this guy.
Ultimately, if I'm being honest with myself, these are still pretty flawed games. Atomic Heart was definitely the most unique one, even though there were some inspirations.
I mean, I don't know about those games, but this one was not that flawed, I don't think.
From BioShock. I still think that game definitely felt like a unique experience, very experimental, but it definitely had some serious flaws that I hope are ironed out if a sequel ever comes out. Stellar Blade was unfortunately labeled as a Coomer game and was stuck on the PS5, which...
You just complained that you were just like, oh, thank God they didn't sexualize the fucking girl furries or something, and now you're complaining... And you're going back to like the boobs are cool. I'm so confused with this guy's criticisms. Is it because they're furry boobs? Like,
no doubt has the gayest player base out of all the consoles, and I say this as a former PlayStation fan. Black Myth Wukong is probably the most polished out of the three, but it's also the least interesting, I would argue.
You didn't finish it.
I mean, yes, I think the aesthetic is unique. We haven't really seen a lot of Chinese-inspired mythological games, so that's kind of cool. But the actual gameplay feels too close to a Souls-like, in my opinion, but without all of the positives that come with that genre. But to make it clear one last time, I think...
Does this guy stream anywhere? Where does he stream? I want to see when the last time he played I want to see when the last time like he played this and see how far. Because I guarantee you, this guy did not beat the game, and it's so weird that this motherfucker is reviewing video games without beating them when his job is to play video games. I mean, at that point, if you're not going to finish the video game before you react to it or you give commentary on it, it just suggests to me that like you are just pushing out lazy slop and trying to be a contrarian so that people will be like, oh yeah. It was Screen Rant that reviewed it at 6 out of 10 for lack of inclusion. Okay, great. That's who they're talking about? Who the fuck is Screen Rant? I don't think that's like a meaningful criticism. It's fucking... Hold on. Where's the fuck... How do you go to... Where's this guy? He's never played a Souls game. He probably hasn't. Where does he stream on? Rumble? He seems like a Rumble or a Kick streamer. Probably a Kick streamer.
I think all 3 of the games I mentioned are decent, and I really hope the next entries made by
this guy didn't beat the fucking game. I can't take him seriously. What is this stupid fuck's name?
Let's throw it on, bro.
Where is his shit? I don't even know where he streams.
Developers are better than the last. And in Stellar Blade's case specifically, I hope when it comes to PC that people actually buy it. As for Black Myth Wukong, it's definitely already a success. 10 million copies sold at the time of recording this. We're definitely going to see more games from this developer, so I hope they learn from their mistakes. And in an ideal world, some Western developers would learn, hey, maybe we should...
Thank you so much for the small gut from Strawberry Chai.
Make some games that don't have left...
He streams his YouTube channel. He puts them all... He hides them all afterwards.
Every time...
So, like, where do you... Does he have... Maybe it's under his playlist?
Propaganda in them, so real gamers start buying them again. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Even Japanese developers are falling to DEI, trying to get some of that sweet ESG funding. Gee, I can't wait to review the Dead Rising remake. But if Black Myth Wukong looks interesting to you, why not give it a try? You'll probably, at the very least, get your money's worth. It's a pretty long game, got a decent amount of options.
Wait. I think this is the last time that he was, oh fuck, where'd it go? Alright, this is, wait. Hold on. I almost guarantee that he didn't even play the game.
Optional content. Like I said, it's pretty good. Steam trying to get some of that sweet ESG funding. Gee, I can't wait to review the Dead Rising remake.
I like how he's playing different... He's showing clips of somebody playing with different weapons that give you different, like, play styles, and he was complaining about that.
But if Black Myth Wukong looks interesting to you, why not give it a try? You'll probably, at the very least, get your money's worth. It's a pretty long game, got a decent amount of optional content. Like I said, it's pretty good, and if you've been watching this channel a long time, you know that's high praise from me. So I'll just leave you with ching chong bing bong, and I'll see you next time, guys.
Definitely had to get that. And this guy's like an adult baby. Holy fuck.
Disgusting black creatures. Get out of my sight.
Okay. Wow. He's not even funny when he's edgy. He's just a fucking weirdo. People would beat the shit out of him in real life. He's so, like, lucky that they have fucking video game streaming. Anyway. I'm pretty sure the last time that he played is, if you go here, is his Black Long, Kong, Schlong, and Dustborn. So that's funny. This is the last time that he fucking played the game, I think. And then he played a different game.
Oh, so I have the ability to up. Design.
He didn't even finish the game. This is the last time he played it. This is Star Wars Outlaws, and it's like aimbot or something, AK, whatever. Star Wars Outlaws. Is it in here? Does he play in here?
Hey, my dryer isn't too loud.
Shut the fuck up. Is he playing in here? Playing a fucking Dragon Ball Z game. This is not the game. Dude, this guy didn't even finish the fucking game. Star Wars. I think it's Star Wars, or this, whatever this is. A slop house. I don't know what the fuck this is. It looks like it's Star Wars.
What are they going to do with...
I think he enjoys playing games like this, because he finished this game, it looks like. So he finished this game and he complained about it being bad. But he finished it, but he couldn't finish Space Marines, Dead Rising. This guy didn't even fit the fucking game. What a weirdo. He didn't even beat the Tiger? Wait, is that true? I wouldn't doubt that at all.
Build, it just refills all your shit.
Does he get the kill on it? I'm actually...
Transform! Oh.
That's him dying again. Let's see. Wait, did he give up after playing Yin Tiger?
In like the next 30 minutes. That boss. Yeah.
Wait, he gave up?
What are you guys talking about?
Wait. Hold on a second. I gotta see this. He went because of the tiger boss. Wait a minute. Holy fuck. Was this guy using other people's...
Oh,
Dude,
fucking hell.
wait, he gave up at the game once he started fighting this. Did he even beat chapter 3? This is the first long that he fought, I'm pretty sure. What? What the fuck? Why did he react to this? He died on Yin Tiger. It took me 2 hours to kill that boss, but this dude didn't even finish chapter 3. Dude, he was using other people's gameplay for this. Bro. Oh my god.